The topic of artificial intelligence and digital technology has topped the agenda at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos. This as businesses and governments look to broaden and increase the digital capacity of their operations. However, the digital divide affecting most African countries may limit access for many. Experts participating in discussions at WEF have emphasized the importance of reskilling the workforce and the young people with digital skills. For more on this now, we speak to Nedbank CEO Mike Brown. Mike, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. So artificial intelligence, of course, a big major buzzword or buzz phrase. The big question is, though, when it comes to the continent, as we've seen, for instance, with cell phones, do you think that the continent will be able to leapfrog when it comes to the implementation of artificial intelligence, and what would that have to take?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And certainly you're quite right. Generative AI has been front and center here at the WEF in Davos. And I guess, like many things that are in the early stages of development, many people make wild predictions about what impacts they may or may not have on skills and jobs, etc. And most of those sort of don't really come true over time. So, I really see what's in front of us now as the next wave of digitization, and certainly for businesses that have invested heavily in digitization up until now, I think they'll be extremely well positioned to use AI and data as a consequence of their digital journey to continue to provide better products and services to their clients and grow. And that's certainly where we think Nedbank is well positioned. From a skills point of view, if you think about our workforce at Nedbank, we really talk to our people about lifelong learning. Many jobs that when people started university or education, the jobs that they do today didn't exist then. So people really have to stay at the front end of lifelong learning. We provide platforms to enable them to do that. And certainly I think that just like we saw the internet and mobile telephony give African productivity and growth a big ramp up, I think AI has the potential to do exactly the same.
Yeah. I was actually listening to an interview that the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, had with Bloomberg. And one of the points that he raises when it comes to how AI could change the labor force and the way that we understand it and how we understand the world of work is that if you look at the second industrial revolution, is that the steam engines and so forth, there was a disruption that was caused and some jobs were affected. However, though, he warns that AI, unfortunately, or fortunately on some ends, is at a much faster speed in terms of affecting jobs as compared to what we saw with the previous industrial revolutions.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think, the ability for new technologies to scale quickly has increased exponentially over the years. But generally speaking, what you still find is that notwithstanding new technologies, economies are still growing, new industries are still being created, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands of jobs will be created around AI, supporting the development of AI, supporting the controls and governance that's going to be required around AI, spurring new industries. So as many hindrances as they potentially are, I think you also have to look at the opportunities that it's going to create.
Yeah. Do you think that AI, for instance, would be able to assist South Africa with its energy needs? And we know that artificial intelligence, of course, would also require a stable energy supply.
I certainly can't see in the medium term, if you look at South Africa's energy problem, in short, we just don't produce enough energy. And the only way to fix that is to produce more energy. And that is being done primarily through self-generation in many people in their homes, but large-scale self-generation and renewables. I think in the medium term, AI is very unlikely to impact that. But over the longer term, could AI, for example, accelerate our scientific progress in batteries that are much more efficient storers of energy? That's certainly possible. But in the medium term, I don't think it's certainly not a silver bullet for our problem.
Not a silver bullet for our problem currently. But what should countries like South Africa then do to become fertile ground where we actually find that there is advancement in artificial intelligence and also the research that is required for that?
I think it all comes down to investment in education, and right now our education system simply doesn't produce the quality that is required in maths, science, and data at a broad level. We've got some elements of excellence, but we need to grow those. So I think it's about education on the one hand, and then on the other hand, about having an economy that attracts investment for new businesses to come set up and grow in South Africa, and for existing businesses to be able to grow, embracing AI, but also, other growth vectors that many of them have in front of them.
Yeah. Considering the investment that Nedbank has done on artificial intelligence, do you think at all that there could be a risk that companies that actually do have the resources to invest in artificial intelligence may just lead us to a widening gap between the informal sector as well as the formal sector, but also inequality in general in a country like South Africa?
That is always a risk. And certainly our business is extraordinarily fortunate that we've been able over the last 5 years to invest, somewhere around about 10 billion rand in a complete refresh of our tech stack, which puts us right at the front end of anything to do with digital. But, at the same time, what we do know is that digital in its own right is a huge driver of financial inclusion. And financial inclusion is one of the biggest drivers of making sure that the gap between the haves and the have-nots gets closed.
Yeah. Let's quickly speak about logistics, a major issue here in South Africa, but now globally as well because of the ongoing war in Ukraine, as well as the Middle East. How is Nedbank navigating that particular space in terms of understanding how logistics would be working and also what needs to happen going into the future, considering how volatile geopolitics is currently?
I think if we just start with the South African environment, what we know is that the challenges in logistics in general and Transnet in particular are probably costing our economy, somewhere around about 2% per annum of GDP growth. And that's an extraordinary cost in an economy that itself is only growing at around about 1%. And in particular, if you add energy challenges on top of that, we've been a very active participant in the platform between business and government, trying to address energy, logistics, and crime and corruption. And I think the adoption of the National Logistics Plan is a very important first step in that direction. More broadly, the global logistics challenges, they show up in second round effects, primarily in higher energy prices, and therefore higher inflation, and therefore interest rates likely to remain higher for longer.
Yeah. And then with geopolitics?
Yeah, certainly, front and center in Davos here is geopolitics. Many people pointing to the world being in a more dangerous state today than it has been since the Second World War. And that's certainly not a good place for economies to grow, for citizens to improve their lives. And there's a huge focus, globally on what needs to be done to try and prevent the hotspots from escalating and spreading, and trying to bring some, normality back into the global order. Clearly that's an extraordinary task.
And finally, in Nedbank scenario planning, do you at all explore what the possibilities are in terms of trade with other countries, considering the decision that South Africa has taken to take Israel to the International Court of Justice, and also considering who Israel's allies are?
Yeah, so look, these are all recent developments. We haven't specifically considered that in our scenario planning, but in talking to businessmen here in Davos, that issue hasn't come up at all. I think that the sort of larger issue still remains the potential for that conflict to escalate, and therefore the challenges for South Africa in economic growth in an environment where global investors more broadly are going to be in a risk-off mindset.
A final one, sorry, Mike, I just need to squeeze this one in quickly. We have the elections that are coming up in South Africa, and we understand that 60% of the economies in the globe are actually heading into elections, at least those countries. Speak to us quickly about the volatility that presents, but also how do you mitigate that?
Well, I think it presents volatility anywhere in the world, but I think if we just focus on South Africa for a moment, what we can tell people is we're a democracy, and we will have free and fair elections in our country. And I think, there's lots of speculation as to what levels of votes various parties may get, but mostly, I think that at the core, the ANC, if you look at polls, you see some at 45, you see some over 50, but that basically tells you that in most circumstances, the ANC will be at the core of whatever policies are required going forward. So that does indicate some form of policy stability.
Thank you so much for your time. Mike Brown there is the CEO of Nedbank, joining us from Davos.